Hello there, I'm Auriane Istangishaka, and this is Our Voices. It is often said that there can be no reconciliation without justice, but what does justice really mean? What does it look like? On this 25th anniversary of the Rwandan genocide, we'll look at women's role in moving the country forward. In Rwanda, women make up to 62% of parliament, the highest in the world, and we'll examine if reconciliation and forgiveness have been achieved 25 years later. I'm here with my colleagues, Hayde Adams FitzPatrick, Hadiza Kayri, Ayen Bior.
Thanks, Auriane. Rwanda's genocide left an estimated 800,000 people, mostly Tutsis, dead. Since then, Rwanda has made progress in recovering from the devastation, growing its economy by 6 to 8% a year, according to the World Bank. Here's more on women's contribution to that growth.
It started on April 6, 1994, when a plane carrying Rwanda's Hutu president Juvenal Habyarimana and his Burundian counterpart was shut down. Mary Berry is an international studies professor at the University of Denver in Colorado.
There was a lot of confusion and, of course, a scramble for power within his administration. And over the next several months, the targets expanded, and Tutsi civilians in Rwanda became seen as the enemy. And the level of brutality, of course, was tremendous. Just over 3 months, perhaps 800,000 Rwandans were killed, and the vast majority of those killed were Tutsi.
Following the genocide, the Rwandan Patriotic Front's Paul Kagame became the nation's de facto leader, first as vice president to Pasteur Bizimungu and later president of the country. Fast forward 25 years later, people are still grappling with what happened. Nadine Yitegeka was only 3 when the genocide unfolded. She's a recent graduate from Rwanda's Akila Institute for Women.
We have a generation now of people whose parents are in prison, a generation that is not like me. They don't even have any parents left. So trauma and healing, it's a process. We are at a good stage now.
One sign of that, the large number of women who became members of parliament.
We used to be a very patriarchal society, and seeing these women break these rules is inspiring. As a young woman, it's possible to do even beyond what they've done, because for me, there are challenges they faced that I won't have to.
Ironically, Rwanda's genocide opened the doors for women because most of the casualties were men. With a survival rate of 70%, women entered fields once closed to them. Women lawmakers who make up more than 60% of the seats have made a difference in crafting policy, according to Berry.
Perhaps the most notable one was a bill related to gender-based violence. And Rwanda's, because of female legislators' leadership on this issue, Rwanda became one of the countries in the world that really put forth progressive and innovative laws and also institutions related to countering and preventing gender-based violence.
But Berry, who wrote a book about women and violence in Rwanda and Bosnia-Herzegovina, says Rwandan women still have a long way to go.
There hasn't been a transformation of patriarchal power relations within the home or within marriage, and there has not been a fundamental, real transformation of how political power is wielded, because the political power in Rwanda is directly rooted and kind of held by the executive.
Berry says while the Rwandan government has benefited globally from its empowerment of women in parliament, she worries about the crackdown on political dissent with the recent jailing of female opposition leaders Victoire Ingabire and Diane Rwigara. Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Washington.
Sounds like Rwanda still has a road to travel there. When we were talking, Ayen, the other day, you were mentioning some of the things that women have been able to accomplish. I mean, we've seen it in Rwanda, women being able to do things to move the country forward, as well as different places in the continent where women has done some great things. You've mentioned some countries where they have been able to do that recently.
Yeah, I mean, who can forget the role that women played in ending Liberia's civil war in 2003? And, you know, these were everyday women. They weren't elite politicians or businesswomen. They were women like our own mothers or our own sisters. And then these women gathered together once again to break Liberia's highest glass ceiling when they got Ellen Johnson Sirleaf elected to become the first female head of state on the continent.
I think that was also breaking the continent's highest ceiling. We often do find that after war, especially in places and countries in West Africa, that women are in the majority because the men were the ones who have gone to war and they're dead. And so often women end up being in the majority, and we see that in Rwanda's case as well.
Right. And, I think there's a need to definitely acknowledge grassroots women who are doing a lot, especially I know one organization that comes to mind is Pro-Fem. So they're lobbyists, and what they do is pretty much make sure that bills are passed. And one of the things that they did was on the educational sector in Rwanda. They have pushed to make sure that women and girls have, high level of education. And this came across when there was a study done in 2017 where the top 10 performers were all girls, and I thought that was impressive.
Yeah, I think when you talk about grassroots, there's actually been about 3 years ago a book that was written by an author called Ayen Bior, and she talks about grassroots, how women were able, especially in post-conflict areas. The book is called Women in Power in Post-Conflict Africa, where women, because of conflicts, there was a shift in status quo, where politically, economically, and in gender roles, women had an opportunity to do movements, grassroots movements for peace and for power, and so they were able to come into power that way through these movements.
I just think women who work and live at the grassroots level just have a highly developed sense of justice and of democracy, because they're the ones who live at the receiving end of injustice, and they're so often excluded from conversations, important decisions that affect their lives. So I think when we do talk about the peace process and women's role in it, I think it's important to not just have women at the peace negotiation table, but also support women who are working to bring about reconciliation and justice at the grassroots level. If we don't do that, we won't have any meaningful change.
And there is research by the Council on Foreign Relations to support exactly what you just said. Did you guys know that when women are involved, peace processes are 64% less likely to fail when women are involved?
Not surprised.
And they're 35% more likely to last at least 15 years. Despite this evidence that women are needed in peace processes, I was shocked to find out that in the history of the world, only 2 women have ever served as chief negotiators for peace processes. Miriam Coronel Ferrer of the Philippines.
In the world?
In the world, only 2. The Philippines had Miriam Coronel Ferrer, and in Israel, Tzipi Livni. And also, only 1 woman has ever signed a final peace agreement. That was the woman from the Philippines.
That's interesting. I want to take us back to the package just for a minute. It talks about having over 62, percent of women in parliament. I find that really interesting. And for me, I feel like people have this perception that they're Kagame's puppets, but to me, there are lots of other women that are in power that are doing great things. The Rwandan Air, which is a national carrier, is headed by a woman. The mayor of the capital is also a woman. The leader of the Francophone country happens to be a woman. As a matter of fact, 2 Rwanda ambassadors to 2 powerful countries, the UK and the US, happen to also be women. So even though people claim, in quotes, allegedly, like, those women are his puppets, and he put them there to control them. I don't see that, because I've seen them doing a lot of things, to help other girls. They're making decisions in favor of women. But we've seen that in Aquila. They have the Aquila school that they have created. They have police stations.
But that's all fine and well. But I think often we give too much credit to politicians and to presidents like Kagame for, look at all the women they have in parliament. Women make up more than 50%. They're like at 52% of the population. Rwanda. So we're giving someone credit for doing things the right way. That is how the world should be. The women in his parliament are representative of the demographics of the country. It's he's just allowing justice to happen.
But also to your point, as a person who covered that region, the critics, I can give you 3 facts of why the critics said that. One being that a president who's been in power for 25 years and changing the constitution to stay in power for an additional year up to 2034, and you have all those women empowered, as you said, they have not been able to vocalize or say a red flag on that. Also, you have, as you heard in the package, Diane Grigara and Ingabire, the only women who have tried to rise to power have been jailed and released, yes, but
meanwhile, the parliament has not said anything about
both of them.
Right women, you need the right women in parliament who are effective.
But we have a lot to talk about. The conversation is just getting started. When we return, we'll push this conversation a bit forward. We'll discuss the difficulties surrounding forgiveness and reconciliation. As we go to the break, let's hear the words of some survivors.
I lost all my children, my husband, my parents, the parents of my husband, and all their families. Long ago, when someone lost a husband, her family or other people would help her. But for us, it was different. You would think you're the only one in that situation, but later you realize that there are others like you. I was with my children when they died. There's a lake between Kigina and Nyarubuye. That is where the mob took us. When we reached there, the Interahamwe gave orders to let the women leave. I had 3 male children and my sister's son. They were tired of using machetes, so they threw my children into the lake. After they threw them into the lake, I threw the baby carrier I had in the water too. They pulled it back using the upper limb of a bull. They beat me seriously. We're letting you leave, but you must bear us children. You should not bury the baby carrier. We have killed Tutsis, but you will give birth to Hutus, and you'll carry them on your back, they told me.
Today, we have passed the bad times because even God Himself has spared us, and we are alive today. If they were alive and I met them today, I think it would be easy for me to forgive them. For a country to get reconciled, people need assistance. Rwanda reached an extent where people must be retaught the necessity of peaceful coexistence. In a small country like this, it is necessary for people to be reconciled. We share everything in this country. My view of a reconciled nation is for everybody to feel that they are all citizens, brothers who share everything and work together.
On Our Voices, we're talking about the news and issues you're talking about.
Sharing stories of development and growth across Africa,
Around the world and in our lives.
Topics that inform, empower,
and change the rules.
It's time for Our Voices
With me, Hayde Adams FitzPatrick.
and Hadiza Kayri.
And Ayen Bior.
and Auriane Istangishaka.
Join us on Facebook at VOA Our Voices.
It's time for Our Voices.
Welcome back. You're with Our Voices. Honestly, forgiveness doesn't just come naturally. Often, it takes generations' effort to bring families together. VOA's reporter Eddie Gwema visited Rwanda last year. Near the capital in a village called Buguli, a heart-touching story unfolded. 25 years ago, Silas Bihizi joined other ethnic Hutus in killing his Tutsi neighbor. Bihizi was arrested in early 1995 for his actions, which he came to regret. He was sentenced for 13 years in prison by a community-based court that included relatives and friends of his victims. Among them was the family of Bihizi's neighbors, Valens Rukiriza. Despite his repentance, Bihizi has been having a tough time facing his neighbors. But a big step came 2 years later when Bihizi's son approached him with plans to marry Rukiriza's daughter.
When he told me that, it felt like he had opened an old wound. Well, I had asked for forgiveness for the crimes I committed, but I couldn't imagine having to face Rukiriza again to tell him that my son wanted to marry their daughter.
Murairi's father initially resisted too, but the young couple were deeply in love.
My fiancé used to tell his friends that if I don't marry that girl, I would commit suicide. He repeated those same threats to my family when we visited them. Then my father asked why he should go through that. It is then that I made a decision. Instead of losing him, I would rather stay away from my family if they opposed our marriage.
Rukiriza said he relented and blessed his daughter's marriage because he wanted to support reconciliation.
Hating reconciliation is adding a heavy burden on yourself. It leads to a lot of stress. If I had not been courageous enough to accept to forgive, I would be a useless person by now. I wouldn't be the man I am now. I would be a drunkard here. I had that courage, and God helped me through that process.
Today, both Rukiriza and Bihizi's bloodline commingle in 3 generations of beloved grandchildren. Nice, beautiful story.
Yeah, such a powerful story.
1994 was such a pivotal year in African history because at the time when this genocide was happening, in the month of April, in Rwanda, that same month we were seeing the dawn of democracy in South Africa with our first democratic election. So this is a big 25-year anniversary for us as well. But you know, when it comes to the issue of forgiveness, I think Nelson Mandela was very astute in seeing, even back then, that forgiveness was not just going to be about a humanitarian gesture. You know, for him, it was necessary for the nation's survival. He also used it as an economic strategy because he knew that if he did not unite the nation through forgiveness, that he was worried the country was going to break up, balkanize, essentially. He was also worried about white capital flight because his responsibility was also to keep the country's financial health and wealth intact. You know, so you know he had all. It was all centered around forgiveness. But even today, many people say that Nelson Mandela essentially sold black people down the river. That he essentially made a bad deal for them because what they see is that his decision and the deal he cut allowed white perpetrators to get away with their ill-gotten gains. And black people are still waiting for justice. And some say that we should not have had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
It's all about economics.
Right, and that we should not have had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that allowed people to get amnesty. We should have had what Rwanda had, a tribunal, and actually see perpetrators go to prison.
And I think at the end of the day, when it comes to ethnic or religious or any kind of conflict, it all goes back to social and political and economic power. Because, I mean, you have a situation where if two tribes, like in the case of Rwanda or in Burundi, still feel like one is being marginalized.
Correct.
I think the bread and butter issues, like in Burundi or Rwanda, as we have seen, is one wanting to get into power. In Burundi, what we have been able to do, once again, is to share power. I believe in quotas. I believe in sharing of powers. And until two tribes, Hutus or Tutsis or any other tribes on the continent, they don't come together and agree that they are equals, that hopefully share power, I think we can still see conflicts over and over again.
You know, I feel like if we're speaking about forgiveness and reconciliation, the Nigerian-Biafran War that occurred in 1967 comes to mind. And this war was as a result of a certain ethnic group trying to break away from Nigeria, the Igbo tribes precisely. So there was a coup, obviously, and a lot of people were killed, and then a counter coup, and all hell broke loose. So anyway, but the main thing that I want to talk about is the fact that the president at the time, General Yakubu Gowon, he came up with this elaborate plan to make sure that, we build back again, called the 3 R's, rehabilitation, reconciliation, and reconstruction, which I think was powerful, and it gave birth to NYSC, which is also it was a national youth program, national youth service program geared towards the youth. So the whole idea was to make sure that every graduate would have to go through this national service program for a year to a different state other than your state. And I remember some of my friends being posted to, who were from the north, like myself, posted to like the south, the east, and they have these beautiful stories.
As long as it's outside of
your they have these beautiful stories to tell. And I think that, a lot of people felt like it failed, but I think it worked because even since then, it happened 1973, and it's still happening. But there's still fractures that we're still suffering. The Biafran War still keeps resurfacing over and over. So
and
I like that aspect.
In the situation of Sudan, hopefully, since the conflict is still going on, how is
well, Hadiza mentioned rehabilitation, and I think that's something that we don't talk about enough. I've covered South Sudan for years. I've seen multiple peace agreements being drawn up, and I've seen multiple peace agreements fail. But these peace agreements governments don't always mention the toll that these wars have on our mental health.
Right.
And we see this happen, country after country. In Cameroon, they're fighting. The English speakers and the French speakers are fighting right now. And the Ministry of Health's budget has less than 1% that goes to mental health in Cameroon. And so I think that we need to re-envision how we deal with these issues, because years after the trauma of war, it sticks with us, it stays with us.
Right, I think what was missing in South Africa, there was a lot of emphasis on reconciliation, about forgiveness, but not enough emphasis on atonement. And atonement is so important because that speaks to doing right by the people you've done wrong. And it speaks to reparations. I've had family members who were kicked off their land, who lost everything and was stripped of their dignity. I remember my great aunt and how these people just could never get over it. It means I also can't get over it.
Right,
to this day, there was no apology.
To that question, though, Hayde, and I understand where you're coming from, but what I'm always asking in a situation of maybe Rwanda and Burundi, where I'm from and what I've covered for a long time, forgiveness. Who should ask for forgiveness? Because we have children who were born after the genocide. They're 25 years old. They don't know what happened before. Who should ask for forgiveness?
That's a very important question that we're dealing with in South Africa. Extremely important, because no one issued, in my view, a formal, official apology to the black South Africans for the pain that they had been caused. F.W. de Klerk gave some weird statement about the policies were misguided. That's not an apology. I'm sorry.
But there is a clear line between forgiveness and creating laws that show that you're sorry.
And also it was like I said earlier, the atonement was missing. Today we have young black discontent and we have young white discontent. Black people still feeling that no one recognizes the pain they've gone through. White young people not understanding why they have to pay for the sins of their fathers. So I think that if their fathers really did do a proper apology, even if they did not want to do it and they don't want to apologize and ask forgiveness of black people, they should have done it for the sake of their children.
So
because
today
young people are faced with the legacy of unforgiveness. And if you run away from your crimes, if you try to minimize what happened, your nation will never get past
That's
it.
exactly right. I think that when we pretend that we are all the same, when we are not economically, politically on the same foot, I mean, we have a policy that I have a lot of reservation for in Rwanda, where it says that we're all the same, everything is good now. I have an example. When slavery was happening in the U.S., when it ended, you could not say we are not all the same, let's live life, but you have to recognize
the starting point was not the same.
Starting point is totally different politically. I think the Hutus and the Tutsis are not on the same foot. The blacks and the whites are not on the same foot in the U.S. politically nor economically.
Because
so we have to see
Auriane,
people where they are.
Equality is about, you cannot have equality without justice. And justice is about equality, but equality is not always about justice, not the same thing. And the starting points are not the same.
The starting points aren't the same at all.
Well, whether or not we're the same, we all agree that forgiveness is necessary. Speaking about forgiveness, we want to get you talking on social media. Catch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Search for our handle at VOA Our Voices. You find videos and updates. Remember to share your page and shows with your friends. Our hashtag is Our Voices.
And of course, if you are on WhatsApp, we're there too. Our number there is US country code +1 304 506 3638. After the break, we'll introduce you to some women to watch. And these women know just a little bit about the power of forgiveness. We'll be back in a moment.
Africa are working diligently through the reconciliation process to address human rights atrocities on the continent. Today we highlight two women who knows that to forgive is divine in our Women to Watch segment.
I'm watching South Africa's Navi Pillay. She was the first non-white woman to serve as a judge on South Africa's High Court. This woman is an expert on international criminal law and human rights. Now, she was the first and then only woman judge at the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. It's a post she held for 4 years. These days, Pillay continues to champion various human rights issues using her direct experience having grown up under South Africa's apartheid regime. She's also the co-founder of the international women's rights organization Equality Now.
Another woman is Immaculée Ilibagiza, a survivor of the 1994 Rwandan genocide. Her entire family, except for one of her brothers, was massacred at the hands of Hutu fighters. Immaculée found shelter at a pastor's home where she and 7 other women hid from the deadly mob in a 3-by-4-foot bathroom for 91 days. During those unimaginable 91 days of suffering, Immaculée found her faith, taught herself English, and most incredibly, committed herself to a life of peace, hope, and forgiveness, even for those who murdered her family. And if you ladies want to read more about her, you can pick up her New York Times best-selling book. It's called Left to Tell, Discovering God Amidst the Rwandan Holocaust. It sold 2 million copies. It's been translated into 17 languages, made into a documentary, and it's also been made into a play that's opening this week.
Wow, that's amazing.
That just epitomizes forgiveness and the willingness to move on, right?
Sure.
And learn English.
And learn English in 91 days.
What an incredible story.
I actually want to read that book. That sounds interesting. Yeah. Before we close today's show, we'll leave you with a quote from Lima Gobwe, who received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011 for her work in leading women's peace movement that brought the end of the Second Liberian Civil War in 2003. She used her voice to say, "Don't wait for a Gandhi. Don't wait for a king. Don't wait for a Mandela. You are your own Mandela. You are your own Gandhi. You are your own king."
And that's our final word for this week. Be sure to watch our voices on the VOA website, where you can find the world's top stories and this week's special coverage on the 25th anniversary of the Rwandan genocide. On behalf of the Voice of America and along with my colleagues, thanks for tuning in. I'm Hadiza Kayri. Good day.